Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez looked up from her station, her face pale. 17 mining operations abandoned in the last 48 hours, sir. Pattern's consistent single attacker. No survivors willing to stay and fight. Marcus studied the data streaming across his screens. Each report told the same impossible story. A lone figure, standing nearly 10 feet tall, systematically dismantling their operations with precision that defied explanation. Not destroying them, taking them. Every piece of equipment, every prefab, structure, vanishing into the planet's dense jungle canopy. "What about the security footage from Mining Station 7? He asked. Rodriguez hesitated. "Sir, you need to see this yourself." The main display shifted to grainy surveillance footage. Through the green-tinted night vision, Marcus watched a figure emerge from the tree line. His breath caught as the creature stepped into full view. She moved with predatory grace despite her towering height, a muscled form covered in what appeared to be organic armor that shifted and adapted to her movements. Her skin held a deep emerald hue that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And her hair, a cascade of silver white that moved like liquid mercury, flowed behind her as she approached the mining facility. But it was her face that made Marcus's tactical mind freeze. Alien, yes, but unmistakably feminine, with features that spoke of intelligence and purpose. She wasn't some mindless beast. She was a hunter. She knew exactly what she was doing. On screen, the security team opened fire. Plasma bolts that should have dropped a charging rhinoceros simply ... stopped, inches from her skin. The energy dissipated harmlessly, absorbed by some invisible field. She didn't even slow down. "Jesus Christ," Marcus muttered as he watched the 10-foot Huntress dismantle the entire security squad with movements that seemed almost casual. No weapons, just her bare hands and a speed that the camera could barely track. The footage cut out as she looked directly at the surveillance drone. Her eyes a brilliant gold, with vertical slits seeming to stare right through the screen at him. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "How many men have we lost?" Marcus asked quietly. "None, sir. That's part of the problem." Marcus turned to stare at his lieutenant. "Explain." Rodriguez pulled up another display. Every male on the security teams, the mining crews, the research staff, they all report the same thing. The moment they see her, they feel ... overwhelmed. Primal fear, but also something else. Something that makes them want to run before she even makes a move. And the women. The few female personnel we have report feeling uncomfortable, but not the same paralyzing terror. It's like she's specifically targeting male psychology. Marcus reviewed the personnel files, his experienced mind already working the angles. Pheromones? Some kind of biochemical warfare? That's the theory, but our xenobiology team evacuated with everyone else. We're down to skeleton crew, and frankly, sir, Rodriguez paused, looking uncomfortable. The men who are left are requesting transfer off-world. They're terrified. The command center's blast doors suddenly rang with a metallic impact that made everyone jump. Then another steady, deliberate rhythm. "She's here," Rodriguez whispered. Marcus activated the external cameras and felt his blood turn to ice. The alien Huntress stood directly outside their reinforced entrance, her massive frame filling the doorway. She wasn't trying to break in. She was knocking, as if she wanted to talk. "Sir," Communications Officer Park called out, his voice shaking, "I'm picking up a transmission. It's her. She's broadcasting on our emergency frequency. Put it through." The speakers crackled to life, and a voice filled the command center deep. Resonant, unmistakably feminine, despite its alien cadence. "I know you can hear me, humans. I am Zarakai of the Valtherian Hun Sisters. I have watched your operations on my world for many cycles, and I have decided ... you interest me." Marcus found his voice. "This is Director Chen. You're trespassing on Alliance territory and interfering with legal mining operations." Her laugh was like rolling thunder. "Your males flee at the sight of me, Director Chen. They abandon their posts, their duties, their courage, all because their primitive instincts recognize a superior predator. But you, you stayed. I have a job to do. Indeed. And I have a proposition. The blast doors shuddered under another impact, but this time Marcus realized she wasn't trying to break in. She was demonstrating her strength. These barriers, like paper, could take whatever I wanted from your settlement. But I prefer ... cooperation. Send me your strongest warrior, your most courageous male. Let him face me in honorable combat. If he can survive one night in my domain, I will leave your operations untouched. Rodriguez grabbed Marcus's arm. Sir, you can't be considering? And if he loses? Marcus asked, ignoring his lieutenant. Then, he becomes mine, and you have 3 days to evacuate this world before I claim it entirely. The transmission cut off. Leaving the command center in stunned silence, Marcus stared at the tactical display, his mind racing through options. Every male in the colony was either already evacuated or requesting immediate transfer. The few security personnel remaining were career soldiers, tough as nails, but even they admitted feeling an overwhelming urge to flee when faced with the alien Huntress. Sir Rodriguez said quietly, "Our psychological profiles show that she's somehow targeting male fight-for-flight responses specifically. Whatever she is, she's evolved to dominate human males on a biochemical level." What about off-world reinforcements? Admiral Torres's battle group is 12 days out. Even if we sent a priority distress call, we'd be looking at a minimum response. Time of 8 days, Marcus finished. Too long. He pulled up the colony's personnel files, scrolling through names and profiles. Mining technicians, research scientists, support staff, none of them combat-trained. And all of them already showing signs of what the medical staff had dubbed predator paralysis syndrome. Then he stopped. "Jake Sullivan," he murmured, reading. "The file, sir. Civilian contractor. Arrived 3 days ago. Former Marine. Multiple combat deployments." Marcus pulled up Sullivan's military record and felt a spark of hope. Afghanistan, Syria, the Titan Rebellion, this guy's seen action. Against everything from insurgents to alien hostiles. But sir, even our best security team couldn't. Our security team never faced anything like this. Marcus interrupted, "But Sullivan has. Look at his psychological profile. Abnormally low fear response, high stress tolerance," and he paused, reading deeper. "He's classified as having an adaptive combat psychology, meaning he gets calmer under pressure, not more agitated." Rodriguez reviewed the file. He's working the deep shaft excavation. Level 15, Grid 7. "But sir, even if he volunteers, what makes you think he can succeed where everyone else failed?" Marcus closed the file and looked at the blast doors, still echoing with the alien Huntress's patient knocking. Because unlike everyone else, Jake, Sullivan doesn't run from the impossible. He runs toward it. 15 levels below the surface, Jake Sullivan paused in his work as the mining platform's communication system crackled to life. He'd been expecting this call. The evacuation alerts had been sounding for hours, and word traveled fast in the confined spaces of the deep shafts. "Sullivan, this is Director Chen. Report to command immediately." Jake set down his plasma cutter and pulled off his work gloves, his calloused hands showing the scars of a dozen different conflicts. At 42, he'd seen enough combat to know when a situation had gone from bad to worse. And the tension in Chun's voice suggested they were well past worse. The elevator ride to the surface gave him time to think. He'd heard the stories of coarse, impossible tales of a 10-foot alien warrior who could make grown men wet themselves just by looking at them. Jake had dismissed most of it as typical mining colony hysteria until he'd seen the empty barracks, the abandoned guard posts, the constant stream of evacuation transports leaving the planet. Something was out there, and it had every male on Proxima VII running scared. Everyone except Jake. The command center was nearly empty when he arrived. Just Director Chen and a handful of support staff who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Chen turned as Jake entered, and the older man's expression was grim. "Sullivan, I'm going to cut straight to the point. We have a situation that requires someone with your specific skill set." Jake nodded. "The alien Huntress. You've heard?" "Hard not to." Question is, why aren't you evacuating like everyone else? Chen gestured to the tactical display where red zones covered most of the planetary map. Because someone needs to buy time for the civilian population to get clear. And because running away from problems isn't an option when you're responsible for 3,000 lives. Jake studied the display, his trained eye picking out patterns in the attack data. She's not random. These strikes are coordinated, strategic. She's herding everyone toward the spaceport. Exactly, and she's made us an offer, Chen explained. The Huntress's proposition, and Jake found himself impressed despite the circumstances. Single combat, winner takes all. It was direct, honest, and gave them better odds than they'd have otherwise. So you want me to fight a 10-foot alien who's been terrorizing the entire colony, Jake said when Chen finished. I want you to survive long enough for reinforcements to arrive. If you can do that, we might have a chance. Jake was quiet for a long moment, considering. He'd faced long odds before it was something of a specialty. But this was different. This wasn't about completing a mission or achieving an objective. This was about facing something that had apparently evolved specifically to dominate and terrify human males. What makes you think I won't just run like everyone else? He asked. Chen pulled up Jake's psychological profile, because you're not like everyone else. Your fear response is practically non-existent. Your stress tolerance is off the charts. And according to your military records, you have a tendency to perform better when the odds are worst. Jake grinned. Sounds about right. All right, Director. I'll meet your alien Huntress, but I do this my way, on my terms.
What do you need?
First, I want to see all the surveillance footage we have. I need to understand what I'm dealing with. Second, I want access to the armory, not the standard security gear, but the good stuff. Industrial plasma cutters, mining charges, anything with some punch. And third, Jake's expression turned serious. I want to understand why she's doing this, because a predator that can make demands and negotiate terms isn't just hunting, she's thinking. And if she's thinking, she can be reasoned with. Shh. Nodded. The footage is ready for review. It's for the armory. ... Double quotes. He hesitated. Sullivan, you should know that conventional weapons seem to have limited effect on her. Then we'll have to get unconventional. An hour later, Jake sat in the command center's briefing room, studying every piece of surveillance footage they had of the alien Huntress. What he saw confirmed his suspicions. This wasn't a mindless monster, but a skilled warrior with intelligence and purpose. Her movements were economical, precise. She never used more force than necessary, never destroyed what could be taken intact. When facing armed opposition, she disabled rather than killed, leaving her enemies conscious, but thoroughly defeated. She's not here to destroy, Jake murmured, rewinding a sequence where she carefully dismantled a mining robot instead of simply smashing it. She's here to claim, but it was the footage from the most recent encounter that really caught his attention. The moment where she looked directly at the camera, her golden eyes seeming to stare right through the screen. There was something in that gaze, not just predatory hunger, but loneliness? Jake shook his head. He was probably projecting human emotions onto an alien mind, but the thought wouldn't leave him. Director, he called out as Chen entered the briefing room. I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. Go ahead. In all these encounters, all these evacuations, has she actually killed anyone? Chen was quiet for a moment. No, injured, yes, humiliated, definitely, but no deaths. Why? Stood up, his mind already working through the implications. Because she's not a killer, she's a hunter. And hunters don't destroy their prey, they capture it. What are you saying? I'm saying this whole thing might not be about territory or resources. It might be about something else entirely. Jake looked back at the screen, where the alien Huntress's image was frozen in time. Something more personal. Chen followed his gaze. You think she's looking for something specific? Or someone? The blast doors shuddered again, the steady knocking resuming. Through the external cameras, they could see her waiting with infinite patience. Her massive form silhouetted against the setting sun. Jake said, checking his gear one final time. Only one way to find out. He made his way to the blast doors, Chen and the remaining staff watching from the command center. As his hand reached for the manual release, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in years, not fear, but anticipation. Whatever waited outside those doors, it was going to be interesting. The blast doors cycled open with a hydraulic hiss, and Jake stepped out into the Proxima VII twilight. The alien Huntress stood 20 feet away, even more imposing in person than she'd appeared on the surveillance footage. 10 feet of sculpted muscle and predatory grace, her emerald skin seeming to absorb the fading light. Her silver hair moved in the evening breeze, and those golden eyes fixed on him with an intensity that should have sent him running. Instead, Jake found himself stepping forward.
I'm Jake Sullivan,
he said, his voice steady. I understand you wanted to meet our strongest warrior. She tilted her head, studying him with obvious curiosity. When she spoke, her voice carried easily across the distance between them. You are... Not what I expected, Jake Sullivan. What did you expect? Fear or submission? The same response I have received from every other male of your species. She took a step closer, and Jake could feel the ground vibrate under her weight.
Ow, but you...
I see the world of our ass to son of us in the size that I sent if and I saw
Jake stood his ground as she approached, fighting every instinct that told him to run. Up close, he could see details the cameras had missed, the way her organic armor seemed to shift and flow with her movements. The intricate patterns that decorated her skin, the intelligence burning in those alien eyes. Maybe I just don't know when to quit, he said. Her laugh was like distant thunder. Perhaps. Or perhaps you are finally the worthy opponent I have been seeking. She stopped just outside arm's reach, towering over him. This close, Jake could smell her, not unpleasant, but alien. Like ozone in growing things, wild and untamed. Cure. Terms were single combat, Jake said. One night in your domain? Indeed. But first I must ask, do you know why I am here, Jake Sullivan? Why I have driven away your warriors and claimed your facilities? Jake met her gaze steadily. I have some theories. Share them. You're not here for resources or territory. You're here because you're looking for something you haven't found. And based on the way you've been testing every male in the colony, ... Double quotes. The pieces clicking together. You're looking for a mate. Her golden eyes widened slightly, and for the first time since he'd encountered her, she seemed surprised. You're perceptive, a little human. Yes, I am what your species might term unmated. Among my people. A hunt sister must prove her worth by claiming the strongest warrior she can find. But the males of my species. She made a dismissive gesture. They are weak, unworthy. They submit to easily. So you came here? I came seeking a challenge. A warrior who would not flee at the sight of me, who would not submit without testing. His strength against mine? Your species showed promise, aggressive, territorial, capable of great courage. But every male I encountered proved disappointing. She leaned down, bringing her face closer to his level. Until now. Radiating from her skin, saw the way her pupils dilated as she studied him. Despite everything, the danger, the impossibility of the situation, the fact that she could probably snap him in half without effort, he found himself attracted to her raw power, her fierce intelligence. So what happens now? Jake Sullivan, you prove whether you are truly different from the others. You have accepted my challenge, and I will honor the terms of our combat. But know this: if you survive the night, if you prove yourself worthy, you will have one more than just safe passage for your people, meaning. Her smile was predatory, but there was something else there to hope. Meaning you will have one. Jake felt his heart rate spike, but not from fear. The alien Huntress Zarakai was offering herself as the prize. Not as a captive or a conquest, but as an equal who had finally found someone worth her attention. And if I don't survive, you will still be mine, but as my claimed mate rather than my chosen one. The difference is ... significant. Jake considered this, weighing his options. Behind him, he could feel the eyes of the command center staff watching through the cameras. Ahead of him stood 10 feet of alien warrior who had just propositioned him in the most dangerous way possible. All right, he said finally, your terms, your domain. But I have one condition of my own. Zarakai raised an eyebrow ridge. You presume to make demands of me? Call it a professional courtesy. If I'm going to face you in single combat, I want to know the rules. No weapons? Hand-to-hand only? To submission? Or to mutual satisfaction, she said, and her smile made. Jake's blood heat will test each other's strength, endurance, and will. The contest ends when one of us can no longer continue, or when we both decide we have found what we were seeking. Jake nodded, understanding the subtext. This wasn't just about combatant, it was about compatibility. She was testing whether he could match her not just in battle, but in other areas as well. Then, lead the way, he said. Zarakai turned and began walking toward the jungle, her movements fluid and hypnotic. Jake followed, acutely aware that he was leaving behind everything familiar and safe to enter the domain of an apex predator who had just as good as told him. She intended to make him her mate, as they disappeared into the green shadows of the Proxima VII wilderness. Jake couldn't help but think that his life had just gotten a lot more complicated and a lot more interesting. Behind them, the command center burst into activity as Director Chen realized that Jake Sullivan had just walked into the jungle with the most dangerous creature on the planet. Should we follow them? Chen stared at the tree line where they'd vanished. With what? Every piece of surveillance equipment we've tried to place in that jungle has been destroyed or disabled. We're flying blind, so we just wait. We wait, Chen confirmed. And we hope that Jake Sullivan is as tough as his file suggests. On the tactical display, 2 dots moved deeper into the jungle, 1 human, 1 alien. Both heading toward an encounter that would determine the fate of everyone on Proxima VII. The jungle canopy closed over them like a living ceiling, blocking out the last traces of twilight and plunging them into a green-filtered darkness. Jake's enhanced vision implants kicked in automatically, painting the world in shades of silver and shadow, but he could tell that Zarakai moved through the dense undergrowth as easily as if it were broad daylight. She led him along paths that weren't quite pathscame trails, perhaps her routes she had carved out during her time on the planet. Jake found himself impressed by her knowledge of the terrain. She had turned the jungle into her own personal fortress, and he was walking deeper into it with each step. Tell me about your people, he said, as they navigated around a massive tree whose trunk could have housed a small apartment building, the Valthurians. Zarakai glanced back at him, her golden eyes catching what little light filtered through the canopy. We are an ancient people, Jake Sullivan. Warriors and hunters, explorers and conquerors. We spread across the galaxy when your species was still learning to make fire. And now, her expression darkened. Now we are dying. Our males have grown soft, preferring comfort to challenge, safety to glory. They seek to avoid conflict rather than embrace it. Hunt's sister, like myself, can spend decades searching for a worthy mate, only to find nothing but weakness and submission. Jake ducked under a low-hanging branch, noting how she moved through the same space without having to adjust her stride at all. The jungle seemed to accommodate her presence, branches bending aside, vines parting naturally. Is that why you came here? It's a human space? I came because I had heard stories of your species' warriors, tales of courage in the face of impossible, odds of males who would fight to the death rather than surrender. I thought perhaps I might find what I sought among your kind. And instead you found a bunch of miners and colonists who ran at the first sight of you? Zarakai stopped so suddenly that Jake almost walked into her. She turned to face him, her massive frame blocking the narrow trail completely. Do you mock my disappointment? She asked, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. Jake met her gaze steadily. No, I understand it. You came looking for warriors and found accountants and technicians? That's got to be frustrating as hell. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You do understand. Yes. It has been frustrating. To travel so far, to hope for so much, only to find that the males of your species are no different from my own when faced with true power. But I'm different, Jake said. So it appears. Question is, how different? They resumed walking, the trail gradually climbing as they moved deeper into the jungle's heart. Jake could hear the sounds of nocturnal creatures stirring to life around them, but none approached. Clearly, the local wildlife had learned to give Zarakai a wide berth. What about you? She asked after a while. What drives Jake Sullivan too? Face what others flee from. Jake considered the question. Stubbornness, mostly. And the fact that running away never solved anything in my experience. There must be more to it than that. I have watched your species, studied your behavior patterns. Most males experience an overwhelming compulsion to flee when confronted with a superior predator. It is a survival mechanism encoded in your genetics. Yet you show no such response. Maybe my genetics are broken, Jake said with a grin. Or perhaps they are evolved. They crested a ridge, and Jake found himself looking down into a natural amphitheater carved from the living rock. Bioluminescent plants provided a soft, ethereal glow, turning the space into something almost magical. At the center, a clear pool of water reflected the alien stars above. Your arena? Jake asked. My home, Zarakai corrected. For now.
I have
Spent many cycles here, watching your people, learning your ways, waiting for someone worthy to face me. She led him down into the amphitheater, and Jake could see that she had indeed made this place her own. Trophies from her encounters with the mining teams were arranged around the space pieces of equipment. Personal items, even some of the prefab structures she'd claimed, but they weren't displayed as conquests. They were arranged like gifts, offerings. You've been collecting things, Jake observed, trying to understand your species through the objects you create and value, your tools, your weapons, your personal possessions. They tell stories about who you are, what matters to you. Jake moved closer to examine the collection and felt a chill of recognition. These weren't random items. They were all things that spoke to relationships, to connection. Family photos, wedding rings, personal letters. She hadn't just been studying human technology. She'd been studying human emotion. You're trying to understand love, he said quietly. Zarakai's response was barely audible. I am trying to understand what I lack. The admission hung in the air between them, and Jake suddenly understood something fundamental about the alien Huntress. For all her strength and predatory power, she was lonely. Perhaps more lonely than anyone he'd ever met. Among my people, she continued, moving to stand beside the pool. Mating is a matter of dominance and submission. The strongest female claims the strongest male, and that is the end of it. But your species, you have something we do not. Something that makes your bonds deeper, more lasting. Not all of us, Jake said, thinking of his own failed relationships. The marriages that hadn't survived his military career, but some I have. Seen it in the objects you treasure, heard it in the communications I have intercepted. Your males and females choose each other not just for strength or survival advantage, but for compatibility, understanding, something you call love. She turned to face him, and in the soft bioluminescent light, Jake could see vulnerability in her expression that she had kept carefully hidden until now. I do not know if I am capable of such a thing, but I would like to learn. Jake felt something shift inside him, not fear or attraction or combat readiness. Something deeper, compassion. This incredibly dangerous, powerful being was asking him to teach her how to love. That's not something you can learn from combat, he said gently. Perhaps not, but it is something that might be discovered through it. Your species speaks of chemistry, yes. The attraction between compatible individuals. Such things can only be tested through intimate contact. Jake felt his heart rate spike again as she stepped closer. In the ethereal light of her domain, Zarakai was breathtaking alien, yes, but beautiful in a way that spoke to something primal and immediate. So what exactly are you proposing? He asked. That we test our compatibility in all ways? Jake Sullivan Physical combat to determine strength and skill, mental challenges to assess intelligence and will, and... She reached out, her large hand gently cupping his face. More intimate trials. To discover whether the chemistry your people speak of might exist between us. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, her palm warm against his skin. Jake found himself leaning into it despite every rational thought telling him this was insane. "You're talking about mating with an alien," he said. "I am talking about finding connection with someone who does not fear what I am." Her golden eyes searched his face. "Someone who might appreciate what I could become." Jake considered this, weighing the impossibility of the situation against the very real loneliness he could see in her expression. She was offering him something that went far beyond the simple bargain they'd struck. She was offering herself completely and without reservation. "The others," he said, "the mining teams, the security forces, they never had a chance, did they?" "You weren't really testing their combat ability, no," she admitted. "I was testing their courage, their willingness to face the unknown rather than flee from it. Combat skills can be taught, weapons can be improved, but courage..." She shook her head. "Courage must come from within. And I passed your test. You passed the first test. Whether you pass the others remains to be seen." Jake stepped back, giving himself space to think. The rational part of his mind was screaming warnings. She was an alien, a predator, someone who could kill him without effort. But the part of him that had always been drawn to challenges, that had thrived in impossible situations, was intrigued. More than intrigued. He was attracted to her strength, her intelligence, her fierce honesty, and beneath all that, he was moved by her loneliness. "All right," he said finally. "It's your tests, your rules. But I have one more condition." Zarakai raised an eyebrow ridge. "You continue to make demands. I am not certain whether this shows courage or foolishness, maybe both. My condition is this: we're honest with each other. No games, no deception, no holding back. If we're going to do this, we do it as equals." Her smile was radiant. "Agreed. Though you should know that honesty, as you call it, might prove more challenging than any physical trial I could devise." "Why?" "Because it will require you to acknowledge what you are already feeling, Jake Sullivan. The attraction you are trying to deny, the curiosity you are trying to suppress, the growing certainty that you want this as much as I do." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. She was right, of course. Despite the danger, despite the impossibility of their situation, despite every rational objection his mind could conjure, he was drawn to her. "You're very direct," he said. "I am Valtherian. We do not waste time with subtle courtship rituals when we find something we want. And what do you want?" She stepped closer again, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin, could see the way her pupils dilated as she looked at him. "I want to discover whether the human male who does not fear me might be brave enough to love me." The words hung in the air between them, a challenge and an invitation wrapped in vulnerable honesty. Jake realized that whatever happened next would change both their lives irrevocably. "Then let's find out," he said. Part 1 of the story ends here, with Jake and Zarakai standing at the threshold of their intimate trials. The stage set for a contest that will test not just their physical compatibility, but their emotional and spiritual connection as well. The jungle around them pulses with alien life. The bioluminescent pool reflects starlight. And two beings from different worlds prepare to discover whether love can bridge the gap between species. The first trial began without warning. One moment, Jake was standing beside the luminescent pool. The next moment, 10 feet of alien muscle was moving toward him with predatory speed. Jake's combat instincts kicked in instantly, rolling left as Zarakai's arm swept through the space where his head had been. "Good reflexes," she said, pivoting to track his movement. "But reflexes alone will not be sufficient." Jake came up in a defensive crouch, analyzing her stance and movements. Everything about her spoke of controlled power, like a coiled spring ready to explode into motion. "No weapons?" he asked, circling to keep distance between them. "No weapons. This trial tests your natural capabilities, strength, speed, endurance, tactical thinking." She moved again, and Jake was ready for her speed. Couldn't match it, but he could anticipate it. As she lunged forward, he dropped and rolled between her legs. coming up behind her and striking at what looked like a vulnerable joint in her armor. His fist connected with something that felt like hitting steel cable wrapped in silk. Zarakai didn't even flinch. Interesting technique, but insufficient force. Her counterattack was a series of rapid strikes that tested every defensive skill Jake had learned. He managed to deflect most of them, but the few that connected reminded him how outmatched he was in raw power. "You're holding back," he said, breathing hard. "Of course. If I used my full strength, you would be unconscious within moments. That would hardly serve my purposes." Jake grinned. "Your purposes being to find out if I'm worth keeping around, among other things. Though your survival instincts are more refined than expected, most males rely on strength and aggression. You rely on intelligence and adaptation. Marines learn to improvise. Show me." This time Jake didn't try to match her strength. Instead, he used the environment. The bioluminescent plants weren't just decorative, they were reactive. As Zarakai charged, Jake grabbed luminous moss and threw it at her eyes. The sudden flare made her stumble just long enough for Jake to get inside her guard. Targeting pressure points from his military training, his strike to what should have been a nerve cluster actually made her grunt in surprise. "Now that was clever," she said, catching his wrist. Her grip was like a mechanical vice, but gentle enough that he realized she was being careful not to hurt him. "Your heart rate is elevated, but not from fear," she observed, her thumb tracing his pulse. "Excitement. Arousal, even. You're enjoying this, are you?" Her smile was predatory and pleased. "Very much." She stepped back. "The physical trial is complete. You have proven tactical thinking and adaptability. Most importantly, you do not surrender when faced with superior force." Jake flexed his fingers. "That's it? That was the first test. Now we move to mental acuity and emotional resilience." The amphitheater began to change. The bioluminescent plants pulsed in synchronized patterns, and Jake realized they were organic technology. The air shimmered, and suddenly he was back on Earth, in a military transport heading toward his final deployment. Psychic interface, Zarakai's voice, came from everywhere. "The plants can read neural patterns and project corresponding experiences. I am seeing what you see, feeling what you feel." The simulation played out his worst memory, the ambush that cost him half his unit, the impossible choice between saving civilians or protecting his soldiers. Jake had chosen the civilians, and 3 of his best people had died covering the evacuation. Through alien technology, could feel Zarakai experiencing it with him not just observing, but feeling his emotions, his pain, his determination. To do what was right regardless of personal cost? When it ended, she was looking at him with something approaching reverence. "You chose to save those who could not save themselves, even sacrificing those under your command," she said quietly. "The guilt from that choice has driven every decision since. I made the only choice I could live with. It was the choice of a true warrior. One who understands that strength without compassion is meaningless." She moved closer. "Among my people, such wisdom is rare. Most of our males seek to avoid difficult decisions. And have you found what you're looking for? The third trial will answer that." The plants began pulsing again, but this time the air between them shimmered with energy Jake could feel on his skin. "What's the third trial?" "Intimacy. The test of whether we are truly compatible." She moved toward him with deliberate steps, her organic armor shifting to reveal more emerald skin beneath. "You're talking about the most fundamental test of all. Whether 2 beings from different worlds can find harmony in the most intimate expression of compatibility." She stopped within arm's reach. "Be honest, do you want me, Jake Sullivan? Not as a curiosity, but as a female worthy of your desire." Looked up at her, taking in the fierce intelligence in her golden eyes, the predatory grace, the raw power. Everything rational said this was impossible, dangerous, insane. Everything else said yes. "I want you," he said quietly. "But is this about finding a mate or someone to dominate? That depends on you. I seek an equal, not a subordinate." She cupped his face gently. "Valthurian mating bonds are permanent. Once formed, they create a psychic connection that lasts until death. Your thoughts emotions. Life force becomes intertwined with mine. Permanent? We would sense each other across vast distances, share thoughts and feelings, even experience each other's sensations. It is the deepest intimacy my people know. Jake felt fear and anticipation, and you want to test if that's possible with a human. I want to discover if you're brave enough to risk everything for something unprecedented. Her touch was gentle but firm. I have been alone for so many cycles, searching, never finding anyone who could match me. You are the first who has not fled. It's the first who might be compatible, the first who might be worthy of love. Jake reached up to cover her hands. Then we do this together. As equals. Agreed. Though Valtherian mating practices are intense, your physiology may find it overwhelming. I'm tougher than I look. As they came together beside the luminescent pool, Jake felt something unprecedented beginning. It started as tingling where their skin touched, but spread throughout his nervous system. He could feel Zurikai's mind brushing against his, tentative but growing stronger, through their connection. Experienced her wonder at his gentleness, her surprise at his courage, her growing certainty that she'd found what she sought. She felt his awe at her strength, his admiration for her intelligence, his deepening attraction to everything that made her unique. When the bonding reached its peak, the plants exploded into brilliant light. Jake felt his consciousness expand, to encompass not just his thoughts, but hers as well. And in that moment of unity, he knew nothing would ever be the same. When the light faded, they lay entwined, their minds connected but no longer overwhelmed. That was unprecedented, Zurakai said, her mental voice now clear to him. There has never been a successful cross-species bonding in all our histories. Jake could feel her amazement and deep satisfaction through their connection. So what happens? Now, we discover what comes after the impossible. Through their link, Jake sensed a biological change in Zurakai. What aren't you telling me about Valtherian reproduction? Her mental touch carried excitement and apprehension. Successful. Bonding triggers immediate conception. Compatible mates produce offspring within hours. Jake felt his world shift. You're saying we have not just found each other. We have created something entirely new, the first hybrid offspring of our species. A new presence touched the edge of their mental connection, not one consciousness, but two twin sparks of life already beginning to grow. Twins, Zurakai whispered in wonder. Our bonding was so powerful it created twins. 6 months later, Director Chen stood in the newly constructed Human Valtherian Cultural Center, watching the impossible unfold before his eyes. Jake Sullivan, now showing the subtle physiological changes that came with permanent bonding to an ANE, alien mate, was demonstrating hybrid technology to a mixed group of human scientists and Valtherian researchers. Beside him, Zurikina, visibly pregnant with twins that had captivated xenobiologists across the galaxy, translated concepts. Between the two species with ease, the bonding process created more than just a personal connection, Jake was explaining to the fascinated audience. It established a template for human Valthorian cooperation at the genetic level. Our children will be natural bridges between our peoples. Through the reinforced viewing windows, Chen could see the jungle that had once been a place of terror transformed into a thriving research station. The bioluminescent plants that Zurakai had used for her trials now served as organic computers, processing data for joint scientific ventures. Director Rodriguez approached with a datapad. The latest reports from the colonial fleet. 17 more human Valtherian pairings have been successfully established across 3 sectors. Everyone has resulted in immediate pregnancy. Chen nodded, still amazed by how quickly everything had changed. What had started as a desperate gamble to save one mining colony had become the foundation for an entirely new form of interspecies cooperation. On the platform, Zurikai's hand moved to her swollen abdomen, and Jake immediately moved closer, their mental connection allowing him to sense her needs before she voiced them. The gesture was so natural, so obviously loving, that it never failed to move those who witnessed it. The twins are active today, Jake announced with a grin. According to our xenobiological team, they're already showing signs of enhanced neural development. They'll be born with the ability to interface with both human and Valthurian technology. And more importantly, Zarakai added, her voice carrying the deep contentment that had replaced her former loneliness, they will be born knowing that love transcends species, that courage opens possibilities we never imagined. Chen smiled as he watched the couple field questions from the eager researchers. 6 months ago, Jake Sullivan had been a simple mining contractor facing an impossible situation. Now he was the father of a new hybrid species and the co-architect of unprecedented interstellar cooperation. "Sir," Rodriguez said quietly, "incoming message from Earth Command. They want to know if we can expand the program." "Tell them," Chen replied, watching Jake and Zurakai demonstrate their seamless partnership, "that we're not expanding a program, we're building a future." Through the viewing windows, the twin suns of Proxima VII set over a world that had become a symbol of what was possible when beings chose courage over fear, love over loneliness, and connection over conquest. And in the growing life within Zarakai's womb, first children of two worlds prepared to inherit a galaxy where the impossible had become inevitable. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.